It was supposed to be a routine flight, a short journey from Wichita to Chicago. But on that fateful evening, American Eagle Flight 5342 never reached its destination. Just minutes before landing, tragedy struck. A horrifying mid-air collision with a Black Hawk helicopter sent the plane spiraling out of control. Witnesses watched in shock as flames lit up the sky. The crash claimed 67 lives, leaving families shattered and investigators searching for answers. What went wrong? Was it human error, miscommunication, or something more? This is the chilling story of one of the deadliest air disasters in recent history. On January 29, 2025 at 5:18 p.m., American Eagle Flight 5342 took off from Wichita Dwight D. Eisenhower National Airport in Kansas, heading for Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport in Virginia, near Washington, D.C. The plane was a Bombardier CRJ-700ER, a small regional jet typically used for shorter flights. This particular jet, built in 2004, could carry 66 to 78 passengers, and on this evening it was carrying 67 people, including passengers and crew. The plane itself was 106 feet long, with a 76-foot wingspan, and it could cruise at speeds of up to 515 miles per hour. Everything seemed to be going smoothly as the flight neared its destination, and the crew began preparing for a routine landing at one of the busiest airports in the U.S. At the same time, another aircraft, a U.S. Army Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter, was flying nearby. The helicopter, known by its call sign PAT-25, was a Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk, a highly versatile military helicopter widely used for various operations. Normally, this helicopter is part of the U.S. Army's Priority Air Transport Service, a program responsible for carrying high-ranking military officials, government personnel, and other VIPs. These flights are typically considered high priority, ensuring that the helicopter is equipped and staffed to handle sensitive and important missions, often requiring top-tier security measures. However, on the evening of January 29, 2025, the helicopter was not carrying any VIPs. Instead, it was being used for a routine training mission. The training flight, conducted by a crew of 3 experienced pilots, was just going through a normal exercise. The Black Hawk is a reliable, rugged helicopter used in many different roles, from military operations to civilian rescue missions. At 8:39 p.m., PAT-25 took off for its training flight from a nearby area. At the same time, American Eagle Flight 5342 started its descent, preparing to land on runway 33 at Ronald Reagan Airport. Both planes were now in the same airspace, with air traffic controllers keeping a close eye on everything. Around 8:47 p.m., the air traffic controller asked the crew of PAT-25 if they could see Flight 5342. The crew of the helicopter confirmed they could see the plane and requested visual separation, meaning they would take responsibility for ensuring their distance from the plane without further help from the controllers. This request was approved, and PAT-25 was cleared to fly behind Flight 5342, giving enough space for both aircraft to operate safely in the air. However, things quickly took a turn for the worse. The 2 aircraft were much closer than anticipated, just 400 feet apart in altitude. They were flying in a tight, busy airspace, and this created a dangerous situation. Just 30 seconds after the approval for visual separation, disaster struck. The 2 aircraft collided mid-air, about 400 feet above the ground. Flight 5342 was traveling at about 145 miles per hour when the collision occurred. The crash caused an explosive fireball that was caught on surveillance cameras. The explosion was so powerful that debris from both the plane and the helicopter fell into the Potomac River. Tragically, all 67 people aboard Flight 5342, including passengers and crew, lost their lives, along with 3 crew members on the PAT-25 helicopter. The magnitude of the loss shocked the aviation world and devastated the families of everyone involved. Rescue teams quickly responded to the scene, but when they reached the crash site, they found only remains of the plane and helicopter. No survivors were found. The impact of the crash on the loved ones of the victims was heartbreaking, and the tragedy left a lasting mark on the aviation community. At the time of this video, The investigation into the collision is still ongoing. However, there are a few key aspects that stand out about this case. First, this disaster marked the first time since 2009 that a U.S. airline experienced the total loss of an aircraft. The last incident of this nature was the crash of Colgan Air Flight 3407, which slammed into a house in Buffalo, New York, killing 49 people on the plane and 1 person on the ground. That crash was caused by the pilot's incorrect response to a stall warning. While air travel remains incredibly safe, tragic events like the collision over the Potomac can make people question the risks involved. It's important to remember, though, that commercial aviation has an exceptional safety record, one that can be broken by a single mistake. Second, questions remain about what could have caused the collision and who or what is to blame. From what is known so far, it doesn't appear that the crew of Flight 5342 made any mistakes during their approach. They were following all procedures, and everything seemed normal until the final moments. So what went wrong? Was it a miscommunication, a technical malfunction, or something else entirely? These are the crucial questions investigators are currently working to answer. If the crew of Flight 5342 wasn't at fault, the focus shifted to the helicopter crew. The pilot of the Black Hawk had communicated to air traffic control that he had visual contact with Flight 5342 and understood that it was his responsibility to avoid a collision by flying behind the airliner. This means that the pilot was aware of the situation and had been given the go-ahead to make that maneuver. However, despite this understanding, the helicopter collided with the jet just under 30 seconds later, which raises several technical concerns. First, the crash occurred at an altitude of just under 400 feet, a height where the traffic collision avoidance system would not have been effective. The traffic collision avoidance system in Flight 5342 would not alert the crew to a potential collision below 1,000 feet. This left the responsibility entirely on the pilots to visually identify and avoid each other in such proximity. In this case, the visual separation approved by air traffic control should have ensured that the two aircraft would not collide. The fact that the collision occurred so quickly after the clearance for visual separation suggests the helicopter pilot may not have been paying sufficient attention. The visibility that night was clear, and the weather conditions were not a factor in the crash. In crowded airspace like that around Ronald Reagan Airport, the pilot should have been fully aware of all nearby aircraft. One possibility is that the helicopter pilot might have been distracted by another nearby airliner, thinking it was Flight 5342. If this other plane was at a distance, the pilot might have felt confident that it posed no threat. This misjudgment could have happened without the pilot realizing it, leading to the crash before he even recognized the mistake. Another possibility is that the air traffic controllers might have been under stress due to the crowded airspace. The Washington, D.C. area is known for its high traffic volume, and air traffic control may have been managing multiple aircraft nearby at the same time. This could have led to a situation where the communication with the helicopter pilot wasn't as clear or timely as it should have been. If air traffic control did not provide sufficient guidance, or if there was a misunderstanding in the instructions, it could have contributed to the crash. Another factor to consider is the potential for a mechanical issue with the helicopter. While there is no direct evidence of a malfunction, it's possible that a sudden mechanical failure distracted the crew, making it harder for them to focus on the visual separation between the two aircraft. Mechanical issues can sometimes cause delays in response times, especially if the crew is focused on solving the problem. Fatigue is another factor that could have played a role. The helicopter crew had been working on a training mission, and long hours or stress from the operation could have impaired their ability to respond quickly and accurately. Overall, this tragic incident involves a complex mix of factors. It could have been caused by a simple lapse in concentration, or a series of unfortunate miscommunications. The investigation will continue to explore all these angles, including the role of air traffic control, the condition of the helicopter, the visibility and proximity of other aircraft, and the mental state of the helicopter crew. Understanding the precise cause will help prevent similar accidents in the future. Following the crash, politics quickly became part of the conversation, which is sadly common after such tragedies. Some individuals began blaming Donald Trump, claiming that his policies led to a reduction in the number of air traffic controllers, which they argued contributed to the collision. However, this claim is false. Donald Trump was not responsible for the crash. This situation highlights how some people are eager to place blame, even without evidence. It's as if there is a deep, persistent anger driving them to assign responsibility, no matter the circumstances. On the other side, Donald Trump didn't stay silent either, making a controversial statement. He suggested that the federal government's focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion was to blame for the crash. While discussions about DEI policies are common in political debates, there is no evidence linking them to this disaster. Bringing DEI into the conversation seemed unnecessary and unrelated. There are many areas where DEI initiatives can be debated, but connecting them to an aviation accident doesn't make sense. Sometimes tragedies occur due to human error, miscommunication, or unfortunate circumstances, not because of broader political policies. The crash of American Eagle Flight 5342 and the Black Hawk helicopter was a heartbreaking tragedy that took the lives of 67 people. Each of these individuals had their own unique stories, dreams, and loved ones. Here are some of the victims whose lives were tragically cut short. Spencer and Christine Lane. Spencer Lane, a 16-year-old figure skater, and his mother Christine were among those who lost their lives. Spencer was described by his father as a force of nature, loved by everyone in his skating community. Christine was a creative soul with a passion for graphic design. The family had adopted Spencer and his brother Milo from South Korea, and their loss has left a deep void in their community. Kaya Duggins. Kaya Duggins was a bright and ambitious woman who had graduated from Harvard Law School and worked for the Civil Rights Corps. She had interned at the White House as part of Michelle Obama's Let Girls Learn initiative. Kaya was returning to Washington, D.C. after visiting her mother in Wichita. Her family and friends remember her as a kind and driven person who made a difference in the world. Evgenia Shishkova and Vadim Naumov. Evgenia and Vadim were a married couple and former world champion figure skaters. They had competed in the Olympics and later became coaches at the Skating Club of Boston. Their passion for skating inspired many young athletes. Their son Maxim, also a skater, was not on the flight, but the loss of his parents has left him, and the skating community devastated. Peter and Donna Livingston and their daughters Everly and Lydia. The Livingston family, Peter, Donna, and their daughters Everly and Lydia, were returning home from a figure skating event in Wichita. Both girls were talented skaters who often shared their routines on social media. Their parents were their biggest supporters, and their loss has left a deep impact on their friends and the skating community. Jinnah Han and her mother. Jinnah Han, a 13-year-old figure skater, and her mother were also on the flight. Jinnah was a bright and talented young skater who had a promising future. Her mother was her biggest cheerleader, and their loss has left their family and the Skating Club of Boston in mourning. Azra Hussein. Azra Hussein was a bright and ambitious woman who had studied corporate finance at Indiana University. She was married to Hamad Raza, who was waiting for her at the airport when the crash occurred. Azra had texted her husband just minutes before the crash, saying she would land soon. Her family described her as a loving wife and daughter with a bright future ahead. Inna Volyanskaya. Inna, a former Soviet pair skater, had won several international medals before becoming a skating coach. She had also performed as Ariel in Disney on Ice's The Little Mermaid. Inna was known for her passion for skating and her dedication to her students. Her death has left a deep impact on the skating community. Samuel Lilly, First Officer. Samuel Lilly, the first officer of Flight 5342, was just months away from being promoted to captain. He had recently gotten engaged and was looking forward to starting a new chapter in his life. His family described him as being in the prime of his life, full of hope and excitement for the future. Jonathan Campos, Captain. Jonathan Campos, the captain of the flight, had grown up in Florida and trained as a commercial pilot. He was passionate about flying and had worked hard to achieve his dream of becoming a pilot. His family and friends remember him as a dedicated and skilled professional. Denasia Elder and Ian Epstein, flight attendants. Denasia Elder, a married mother of two, and Ian Epstein, a devoted father and husband, were both flight attendants on the plane. Denasia was described as sweet and quiet, while Ian was known for his kindness and love for his family. Their loss has left their families and colleagues heartbroken. Ryan O'Hara, Black Hawk crew. Ryan O'Hara, One of the 3 soldiers on the Black Hawk helicopter was a dedicated serviceman and a loving husband and father. He leaves behind a wife and a 1-year-old son. Ryan's commitment to his country and his family will always be remembered. Wendy Schaffer. Wendy Schaffer was a devoted wife and mother of 2 young boys, aged 1 and 3. She was known for her love, kindness, and unwavering spirit. Her family described her as the heart of their home, and her loss has left a void that can never be filled. Grace Maxwell. Grace Maxwell, a junior at Cedarville University, was studying mechanical engineering with a minor in biomedical engineering. She was a bright and ambitious student with a promising future. Her university community is mourning the loss of a talented and kind-hearted young woman. Olivia Eve Terre and her mother Alessia. Olivia, a 12-year-old figure skater, and her mother Alessia were both on the flight. Olivia was a talented skater who inspired her peers and coaches with her passion and determination. Her mother was her biggest supporter, and their loss has left their skating community in shock. Roger, Corey, and Stephanie Hanos. The Hanos family, Roger, Stephanie, and their son Corey, were returning home from the U.S. Ice Skating Championships in Kansas. Corey was a talented skater with a bright future, and his parents were his biggest fans. Their loss has left their family and friends heartbroken. Lori and Robert Bob Schrock. Lori and Bob Schrock were a loving couple from Kansas who were traveling to Washington to visit their daughter. They were known for their generosity and strong faith. Their daughter Ellie, who is planning to attend medical school, will deeply miss their love and support. Pergentino N. Malabed. Colonel Pergentino N. Malabed, a dedicated police officer from the Philippines, was on his way to the Philippine Embassy in Washington. He was known for his commitment to serving his country and protecting others. His loss is deeply felt by his colleagues and the nation he served. These were not just names on a list. They were people with hopes, ambitions, and loved ones who will forever feel their loss. Their stories remind us how fragile life can be and why every moment matters. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments, like this video, and subscribe for more in-depth coverage. Your support helps keep these important stories alive.